Welcome to NOV Today. I'm your host, Michael Gaines. In this episode, I sit down with David Reid, NOV's Chief Marketing Officer, to discuss why NOV is pursuing a podcast. We also get David's perspective on what leadership and failure can mean for the growth of a company.
Wanted to get together with you to talk about NOV Today. So it's a new podcast that NOV is putting out, and I have the pleasure of hosting and facilitating conversations, but really wanted to talk about how we even got to this point. So I think this may have been one of your ideas that manifested itself into what it is now. So maybe just to give people a little background as to, one, why a podcast, and two, what are we trying to accomplish through this medium?
So I had a strange experience last OTC where we had a social media plan and we decided to have a hashtag and do a few interesting things at the shrimp boil. And then someone picked it up who was running a podcast. They'd never heard of these people, but they put a nice write-up, nice comment, very happy and engaged with our social media. And then they did something afterwards where they called us out and did detailed work explaining why they thought we were doing good social media. So it led me to listen to their podcast. So I was really surprised as I kind of followed up with them to learn how many people are listening to podcasts, how it works as a medium, how you can use it while you're driving, you can use it while you're working, but you get to kind of control the listening as well as learning while you're doing something. So I just was surprised at the reach, the age groups, how much it works around the world. Mm-hmm. Some of the feedback from people on their podcast and where they were working and what they were doing told me that there is an untapped opportunity for us to communicate. And so that really began the thought process. And then yourself, actually. Michael, you have a microphone on your desk.
A face for radio.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that made me think as well that you have a good voice for voiceover type stuff, and those two pieces came together in my mind. We'd had lots of requests around podcasts, but they seemed very vague to me. Mm-hmm. And then as we trialed it, the personal feeling you get from having someone in your ears talking to you, it seems to really connect well. Mm-hmm. So I find that listening to podcasts myself.
So through NOV Today, of course, so it sounds like, you recognize it's a great communications channel, but if recalling on conversations we've had before, I think your thought and approach was, this isn't necessarily going to be a daily news program where we're, trying to regurgitate, market headlines or industry news, but more of the stories and the people behind, some of those headlines. So can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, I know that's a passion of yours is really people and leadership and development and growth and things like that.
I think particularly in our company, one of the things I enjoy growing in the business, I've been in NOV 25 years, but it's the characters that are fascinating. And it's not just that they're interesting people, that their stories have a lot of meaning. Their connectedness to the business, to the people in the business, their vision and passion is something that when you hear it and you connect to it, you catch it. You immediately feel like I'm a part of something here that is more than just making product. And I think it sounds odd to hear if you've never experienced it, but as you hear throughout these podcasts, the people and the technology and the connection between the community that is our company and the passion that drives it, the interest in not just making money fundamentally, but actually creating better lives for the people we work with and the customers that we serve. It's really quite unique, I think, in our business. And I think people hearing that and getting a feel for it and getting that connection that I've had and many have had growing in the business and access to some really wonderful leaders who are very colorful. I mean, the range is going to be interesting for everyone. The range of personality. We're not a one type company. We're trying to create one type of person. We're a huge range of personality and characters, and but we have this common theme of feeling very connected to our product, our business, and each other. And I think it's worth hearing and trying to help people get access to.
Any stories or experiences that you would say kind of personify what it is that you're trying to accomplish through this podcast? I mean, what are some experiences that you've had that you think would maybe help sort of give people a feeling for what we're trying to accomplish here?
Oh gosh, there are thousands, which makes that a really difficult question, because about 1,000 things just went through my mind.
We only need one.
Just one, so let's pick one. Early characters for me, I think if I was to, going through a downturn is one of the hardest things I think that we can go through, but the reality of life is that there are downturns all the time, things that come at us that we can't control. But one of the characters, when I joined the company in 92, the chairman came through to visit, and I'll never forget meeting him and the engagement that I actually worked in an office in the repair workshop. But this guy walked past and he just kind of said hello, and he seemed very engaging. He just talked to me a little bit, but I remember feeling connected to this guy and interested, which was odd, honestly. I had never heard words like this out of leadership, and he would talk about how hard things were, but he reminded everyone we do this for the people. We do this for the people we work with, for the families that we're connected to. And he talked about work in a way that was something I'd never really heard before. And this continued through being in the company. There wasn't just him, but multiple leaders who talked like him. And it wasn't that every leader, every person that you worked for, everyone you were around was exactly the same that way, but there was something coming from the top that was quite inspirational and encouraged us to behave differently and to think differently. And he talked about the pain that we were going through, which I think was very unique for most people. Most people dealing with hard things want to not talk about it. But then he pushed us through to thinking about the benefit of working together and creating a great business that people can be proud of and can be a part of, that can really help. And that was very encouraging for me. It showed me a type of leadership that I really wanted to follow. I wanted to be that way. So I think inspirational leadership has always surprised me inside of oil and gas, because my perceptions from the outside were not good. So I really hadn't planned on a career until that moment. So that's probably why it sticks out, is that moment I started wanting more of whatever that was, which really was leadership more than it was the industry itself. But I grew to really connect to the industry as well.
If someone is in this industry and they've been here for a number of years, and they're hearing what you're saying and say, okay, I like the idea, but I don't know how to get to the end result, right? So how do you change a culture to be able to embrace that type of radical thinking? Because it's not the norm, right?
Yeah. Well, I think probably the boss after, when I was out in California and had this direct boss called Maury Jakes, he was one who helped me put it together. How do you help people get to this place? Because there is a general leaning towards the negative that happens in groups of people, where we can all describe what's wrong. But I think the thing I learned in the shop particularly, and then moving on, I actually got into designing product a little bit. But the thing that really struck me after that moment was my personal responsibility to lead. So even though and that didn't mean I need to get a microphone and talk in front of everybody. It meant that I have to start acting out in a way that may be counter to what I see around me. When you learn to do that, to get people to go the right direction, you learn something very quickly. If you're interested only in yourself, they might pretend to go that way, but they're not going that way. But if you're interested in the general good of everybody and the team and the company, people can get behind that. And they do get behind it when they know you're not about serving yourself, you're about serving the company. People like it. People tend to attract to it. There's always people who think it's ridiculous, and but at the end of the day, that doesn't inspire. If you imagine a negative outcome for things and people, you have more chance of succeeding. But if you push yourself to think about a more positive outcome in life and of business, your ideas that come start giving a new level of hope, and then what follows is a bunch of people who will get behind that. And suddenly business changes, things get better, and they get to be a part of something positive. Once you have a taste of that, a taste of making something change, you're not as interested in describing why things can't change.
As in listening to you, I'm thinking through, okay, if I was either managing a group or a part of a company where I wanted to incorporate some of this, immediately some of the things that start going through my mind are, okay, well, if we're going to encourage or enable this type of environment, that means that I need to relinquish some control that I once potentially may have held tightly, right? I think I won't say a lot, but there are many organizations or individuals in leadership positions who think, okay, well, the more control I have over the group, that means the more output I can have, and I keep predictable outcome. But how do you reconcile, or maybe speak to someone who has that kind of maybe approach or perspective?
The sad part of that kind of leadership is that you're summing up the potential of a group to your own potential. In other words, you're assuming you're smarter and better than everyone in the group. And it's even possible that you might be pretty smart, but there's no way in a group of people that you are the sum total, that you can actually, just by everyone doing what you think is right, will suddenly everything get to its maximum potential. It won't. It gets to the potential that you have. And that can be good. I mean, there are leaders who do that, and that style works. But what gets really interesting is the capability of human beings, when inspired, to do things beyond what you would imagine. We all have it inside of us, this ability. So unlocking that gets much better results. And so the desire to control is really coming from a fear of failure. And so when you're trying to control, you're trying to stop things going wrong. And most leaders have an experience that says, I'm pretty right a lot of the time. So you're doing things, and you found in life that maybe I'm 90%, and maybe it's not, but you feel like it is. And so then you start pushing for, I've got 90%. That's the kind of person I am. And so you start to ignore that there's 10% that's wrong, or maybe it's more than that and you're not aware. But either way, you start pushing for your agenda, and you start to think, all we need is everyone to do what I say and it'll be fine. Which sounds all great, but that does not. The great results happen when you learn to take what you have and amass it together. And that means that you have to learn to really serve the growth of others. Mm-hmm. Things might not be as perfect as you want it. And I'm that guy. I have a level of disappointment that I have to constrain within myself as things happen, because I want certain levels of excellence and performance. But I've learned I can get much greater results out of people by allowing them to fail and not thinking of that as a style. A lot of people look at human failure of others and decide that maybe that's what they're here for, is to show us the wrong way. And it's not true. Humans are innately learners, and part of learning is making mistakes. And so it's more containing the mistake potential with people. Let them make mistakes, let them grow, give them experiences, and be ready for things not to be perfect.
How do I fail and create an organization that accepts failure through the lens, or sees it through the lens of growth or maturity?
Yeah, I mean, failing is something it's going to happen. It's a question of what do you do with when it happens, and how bad is it. So everyone should be allowed a certain level of being exposed. to some risk. But you try and control that as best as you can. And then in a downturn, it's a time where you've got to push the boundaries a little bit. So if you just huddle down in a downturn, you may or you may not survive in your job, or the company may or may not survive. But if you're going to mindfully hope for a better future, you need to be testing a few things. You need to be trying some things, and that means there's going to be failure. But also it means there's opportunity. I led a leadership class for us for a while, and people would always say, well, I like what you're saying, but my boss isn't that way, which is a classic victim thing to say. Oh, no, my boss isn't that way. I said, well, I'm not talking to your boss. I'm talking to you. We have no control of your boss, and we have no control of others. We can only deal with ourselves. And that's where the hard work is learning to become a better leader and grow people. And I think that's a good guide for us, if we take on that as a responsibility, because we often think that the task that we're trying to do is the intent. If we just do the task well, I'll be a good employee. If I get someone to do the task well, I'd be a good manager. And in truth, it's really, if we think of the individual and the person and say, my job is to grow the person, the task is the tool that I'm going to use to grow the person. So if the task isn't working for the person, change the task, but grow the person. And when you take that on as a mentality, the results become amazing.
I've heard rumors that you're not all work and actually enjoy having fun sometimes. Is that a true fact? Is that a true statement? Would you agree?
I have to admit, it's a trained behavior. It took me a long time to have a life, but.
So what would you say? So I've got a couple of questions here for you. So I'm aware that you do a bit of traveling, and from your accent, I know that you're from West Texas. So East Texas, exactly.
Way east.
So where would you say probably the best places that you've traveled to date?
The best places.
Yeah,
it's an unreasonable question.
Well,
but, if there is one place that I tell people when they say you've seen all these things in the world, what's the best place? And it's an odd one because it's on in Germany on Lake Constance. There's a town called Friedrichshafen that has stuck in my mind. It's just this beautiful place on earth that I remember. So yeah, that was from a natural beauty standpoint. You've got Switzerland over the lake, the other side of the lake, and it's a really nice place.
That does sound nice. How do you take your coffee?
Well, that's a good question.
I try to ask good questions from time to time.
It really is. It's probably my favorite question. I usually take it with half and half, but this morning I misunderstood the guy, and so I am actually drinking black coffee this morning. So I'm pretty flexible because if you're on a drilling rig, there only is black coffee usually. So
should be.
I can flex.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks, David. I appreciate our time this morning.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of NOV Today. We'd like to hear your feedback. Share your thoughts by tweeting us at NOV Global and using the hashtag NOV Today. Or you can contact us by sending an email to podcast@nov.com. For NOV Today, I'm Michael Gaines. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later.